Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I am speaking with Reena from the show Better Call Daddy. Hey Reena, thanks for speaking today.
Excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. So what was your introduction to podcast? How were you introduced to the world?
I was introduced to the podcasting medium, I would say, through working at a radio station in college. That's when I started learning how to find stories and edit stories and get on a microphone and drop in music and get creative in the audio space. I didn't really start podcasting until I was connected to a guy on LinkedIn, Greg Johnson. I'll give him a shout out. And he had a podcast back when people were doing it like recording Skype. And he was looking for someone to help him find more interesting guests and widen his audience and cover different subject matters. In the beginning, it was like him and another recruiter, and they were using it as a tool to reach out to people in the recruiting industry. But then he wanted to open it up to other creators and authors and people that wanted to tell their story. And I was like, oh, well, I love casting because I had worked in casting in my reality TV show days. And so I started helping him with guests and further promoting. And then he was like, hey, it might be interesting to have a woman's perspective on the show. And so then I started guest hosting and collaborating, and I loved it. And I did that with him for maybe 20 episodes or something. And then his show fizzled off like a lot of podcasts do. And then I ended up working for a couple of other podcasters in a similar capacity where I was helping them book guests and helping them with their events and helping them run their social media. So that's really how I got started, was helping other podcasters who were doing it and listening to their shows and seeing the whole process of putting it together.
So when you were doing college radio then, was that pre-record or was that complete, or was that a mix of pre-record and live?
Great question. I was working in radio pre-automation, but right when automation was starting to happen. So when I very first started, yes, if there was some dead air, you had to throw on a record or throw on some music. And then towards the second half of my stint in radio, we were able to pre-record everything, do multiple takes, and insert it into the time we wanted it to play. So I have experience with both.
So here comes a difficult question. Which do you prefer?
Ooh, I prefer pre-recorded and edited. It makes me feel more comfortable. And you can always edit yourself again and again. And I am a recovering perfectionist, so I always could make more edits. But I would say I am getting better now, having done over 350 episodes. Usually I can do an intro or a reaction with my dad on our podcast in 1 or 2 takes.
Yeah, you've already brought me into that, and I was going to come to that later with the recording and editing section. So obviously you record it in 2 separate. So you record the chat, or you record a lead in to the actual chat, I'm guessing. Then you do the chat, and then you record the discussion afterwards with your dad.
So I interview a guest, then cut that down. Then I send my dad the edited version of the conversation with the guest. And then actually we do our reaction and his reflection on the episode. And then from the reflection, I create the intro most of the time. Some of my guests I have done live in studios. I like to mix it up. It's fun to interview local creatives or local podcasters or people from events that I've met. I've done a few of those. And so sometimes I will do a short intro there. And if it goes well enough, I'll just keep that. So I have mixed it up. But the majority of the time now, I like to think about what my dad has said in reaction to the person that I've interviewed and include that in the intro.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in a sense because to go into show history or in description, like I hinted at there, it's you have a chat with somebody, and then after that you ask for your dad's reaction to it and what the takeaway is from it, from his point of view, and then any advice that he can give that those people ask for as well. And that's fascinating because you're getting the different generations thing as well, but also somebody that you trust to give you good advice as well that's always got your back.
Nailed it. Yeah. I felt like my dad's known me my whole life.
Yep.
And he sometimes can read me better than I can read myself. And he's really good at synthesizing my thoughts, which is a nice touch / summary at the end of every episode where I might not be able to 100% summarize what my guest has said, but getting him to summarize it or what he took from it is, I feel like you said, an intergenerational twist.
But he's got the wisdom there as well of the experience that he's had with different things, and also his own understanding of how the world works as well.
Yes. And I love that. And truthfully, he surprises me a lot in what he says. And sometimes he'll listen to an episode at night and he'll message me back and he'll be like, hey, have you put the kids to bed? Do you want to do a reaction? But I'll have fallen asleep with my kids. And so what's interesting is sometimes when he sleeps on an answer, he'll have a profound insight in the morning. Like we just recorded a reaction this morning. I was like, Dad, that was like a well-rested answer. Yeah. Like sometimes when he's more tired at night, they're more brief or they're more succinct. And sometimes when he wakes up in the morning and he's thought about it and like really ingested it, it's a completely different revelation.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that the revelation about Reese Quibell, that one there, I'm guessing that was a morning recording, your dad's reaction?
I have to think back, but yes, he definitely did surprise me. Thank you for bringing that up. I even mentioned that in the intro. I did this interview with the lady Reese who had left Scientology, and I really didn't know, honestly, a lot about Scientology. One of my listeners was a big fan of Reese's and sent me that lead. She introduced us. And so she's been listening to my show for a while. We had been connected for 5 years, and some of the best stories come from your listeners that are like, this person would be good for you. And what's so crazy is, shout out to Paula Puffer, after she gave me Reese, we ended up meeting in person because I wanted to like personally thank her. She lived in my area. She works in my area like 2 or 3 days a week. And I was like, hey, my kids are off today. My husband's home. Want to grab coffee? I want to thank you. And so, yeah, I treated her to a coffee and it went 3.5 hours. It was amazing. So, yeah, my dad's reaction on that Reese episode definitely shocked me. And also, I've had multiple people that have reached out from that episode that their stories also have been mind-blowing and super vulnerable. And I have a couple of those coming up that people were listeners to that episode, and then they felt comfortable enough and wanted to hear what my dad would have to say about their stories too.
Well, I mean, as well, that one particularly, you can hear the emotion in your dad's, what he's talking about as well. There is so much emotion in there, and it almost sounds like he's getting close to teary-eyed when he's talking about the relationship between Reese and her father, and that it felt like your dad was reacting to that, and it was affecting your dad thinking about it.
Yeah, that actually is super interesting that you picked up on that because, like I said, I had somebody else recently reach out and she told me that she was molested by her grandfather, which is a very tough subject matter. And even without my dad hearing anything more than that, I guess I might as well tell you her name because it's coming soon. Her name is Kelly Wallace, and she was a big follower of Reese's, and she reached out to me after hearing that interview. And my dad, in reaction to that, also sounded extremely emotional and immediately put himself into the shoes of that situation. and was thinking about the fact that I have a daughter, a young daughter. And he was like, I would rather kill myself than do something like that.
Yeah.
And I could not believe my dad said that. And then I shared that with her because I was like, man, that's so from the heart. That's so real. That was an honest reaction and a very strong thing to say. I started my interview with that. I was like, when I shared that part of my story with my dad, that is what he said. And how, just like, how could she face the perpetrator ever in court? How did she have the confidence as a young girl to stand up to that? And thank God that her mom believed her. Crazy story.
But that's because of your dad's own sense of family. That's what that is. It's how strong a family is, and that family to him should always be there, and they shouldn't be like that. It should always be that relaxed place where you go to when you're in that position that you need somebody or you need that care. That's where you should be able to feel that you can go to and not have that sense of negativity there. It should always be a positive. That's how your dad sees it, I'm guessing.
100%. It's funny. I was even just talking with my own husband this morning, and in the morning we're inundated with messages and requests and things that people want you to help them with. It's a blessing in some ways, but also today's my son's birthday. My son, by the way, his name is Marvin. I know you go by Marv and you're Martin, but I was like, oh, hey, I have a Marv too. And
happy birthday, Marv.
Thank you. Yeah, I was baking a cake right before this. It's cooling now. And I said to my husband, if we responded by what came to our mind, how many people could really handle some of my thoughts? And he was like, I can, your dad can. And that's the truth. Like, how many friends would we lose, or acquaintances or work colleagues, if we were able to truly freely express ourselves? But my dad has accepted me through many different eras, and he very rarely gets off the phone where he's, okay, you need to sleep on this and call me in the morning. Like, he really is able to be there through lots of different moods.
Well, that's that there that you just said, that's something that I always feel myself, that if ever there's a situation or a negativity or there's a disagreement, I don't like to leave the disagreement there hanging and come back to it. I always like to make sure, when possible, that is sorted out before we leave the situation. It has to be sorted out, because I really don't like the idea of things hanging that are a negative in any way.
It's a good goal to have, but life is complicated.
It is.
And family is complicated. And that's why I feel like the show has resonated with so many people. Like, there are endless family dramas and also family inspirations and connections.
Yeah. I mean, this episode, I'm going to keep going to that episode because it just resonated with me. Because, and to mention, to bring it, or to give people a better understanding of it, it's not all negativity. There is that lovely positivity of that relationship she's got with her son. That is an amazing,
beautiful.
That kid is so older than his years, so understanding.
Yes, after I interviewed Reese, I've now gone to many of her lives because I'm like I'm charmed by her. And now, having seen her son Huxley on her lives and their relationship and how they interact live, it's so beautiful. Yes. And the fact that she was able to protect him from Scientology and listen to her gut on some level is also a powerful lesson. I talked about it at the very end of the episode with her. I've had my kids in private school since preschool, and it wasn't a fit for my oldest son, the first school that we had him in. And that can be really hard as first-time parents with your first kid, to be like, okay, this is a school that everybody is sending to in our neighborhood and in our community. And why isn't it working for my kid? And should I believe the school? Should I believe him? Does this feel right for us? It was a really hard decision to pull out of. And I can tell you from having pulled out of it and now switched schools twice, he is thriving. And you got to listen to your body, your spouse, your family, the positive influences in your life. And most of all, something that I am striving to do more is to give my kids the opportunity to contribute as well, and to really hear them and trust them before I trust others.
Hey, this is Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting, a show that helps podcasters plan, launch, and grow their podcast. And you're listening to Pods Like Us.
This is Arthur Dude from Slam City, the world's first Quantimino-powered podcast, and you're listening to Pods Like Us.
Something that, I mean, I've listened to other episodes, obviously. I've listened to quite a few episodes. But there's something about you that you're able to, with the way that you are, you're able to draw such incredible, they're able to open up to you. It's just a natural thing you can hear that you're able, it's like they trust these stories with you in a sense, and they don't mind opening up to you. And it's a natural, it's not in any way, it doesn't sound like a professional radio person would be with the list of questions, get the questions done, and this and that. It's somebody you're somebody that's listening and responding to these little bits, because I'm going to respond to a little bit you mentioned earlier on, actually, that I took note of. Later on I will. But yeah, you have this natural, or seem to have this natural ability just to draw this information out and for people to feel that they can trust you.
Thank you. I try to connect to people. Like, I feel like I connected to Reese as a mom.
Yeah.
And I've seen her do lives with a lot of guys, and I felt like that might be a good connection point for us. And not like Orthodox Judaism as a cult, but it was restrictive. And I spent 15, 17 years in a much more restrictive environment, and I'm pulling out from that too. So I connected in that way. And I believe, and I learned this from working in television, if you're willing to give details and you're willing to open up, then other people will open up with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But the difference is that I'm guessing that Judaism, that's not got the same connotation with she's got, where suddenly she has no friends, she has no family other than Huxley, where she lost everybody that she knew. Whereas I don't think that would happen, I would have guessed, with you leaving the Judaism, would it?
So I didn't lose family members where they're like, I'm going to have nothing to do with you. But there are sects of Judaism that, yeah, if you don't keep the same rules, like if you don't keep Shabbos and you don't keep kosher, then, people won't eat at your house, or they won't come to you during holiday times. Yeah, there is an element of that. And if you don't send to a certain school, then yeah, do they trust eating at your house? Do they trust sending their kids to play with your kids? Yeah, there are elements of walls that people put up because they want to live a certain standard or a certain way of life. And if you're not living the same way of life, then they don't want you to influence the life that their kids are living, to be honest. Yeah.
Wow, that's just, I'm about to say, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. So after we pulled out of that school, and it was the biggest school in town, like 800 kids, the majority of the people on our street were sending there. And we decided to still send to a private school, but it was like people from all walks of life. It was much less restrictive, no uniforms, and there was a kosher food option, but there were kids there that didn't eat kosher food. So yeah, our friend group definitely changed. And I felt much more judged on our street, and I was definitely ready to move. And we did.
Wow.
Yeah. And I even covered my hair. I wore a wig for 15 years. And now I'm not doing that. I wouldn't even show up like this on camera like this 10 years ago.
Wow. 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 So we've sort of like already touched a little bit on this, where the choosing of the guest, I'm guessing it's mixed then. Some people will bring people to your attention, or you will spot people and think, oh, I'd like to have a chat with them.
Yes, it is definitely a mix. In the beginning, I just was like, I have a lot of people that I've kept in touch with from my reality TV show days and people that I've worked on cool projects with that I feel like others might like to be a fly on the wall for. And so I started with people like that. But then I also was like, I should go after just some controversial guests that people might think are interesting. So in the beginning, I was left to my own devices and I reached out to people that I watched on Netflix and I wanted to learn more about their story. I think my guest number 3 was like a Jeffrey Epstein survivor. And again, I connected to her as a mom. She was on a Netflix show and I reached out to her and I was like, oh my God, to your story. I'm so sorry that that happened to you. And I'm a mom. I can't imagine like Netflix or FBI knocking on your door, what either one of those experiences were like. And yeah, she came on my show and I don't think she's been on anyone's podcast since. I think some of it is timing. I think some of it is interest. And then I love collaborating with other creators that are doing what I'm doing too, because I think that we're all at different places and we all have things that we've learned. And I think it's really great to collaborate with other podcasters because I like to see how they do things and they always show up with a mic and curiosity and they'll share it. So that's fun.
I'm going to grab that now that I've had that from when you mentioned it's first off. So the reality TV thing, for anybody that doesn't know, explain this whole reality TV thing, because I'm fascinated now and I'm thinking, what was Reena on? What did she do?
Yeah, I got my very first job at the Jerry Springer Show. And I know that he's popular in your neck of the woods too.
Yes. Yeah. Jerry. Yep.
Yes. And that was my first job out of college. This was pre-internet.
Yep.
And this is when thousands of people were calling in a week with their stories. And Jerry really made his whole career out of letting people tell their stories that might not tell their stories otherwise. They were everyday people. And a lot of times people that had never left their state, never got on an airplane, never gotten a vacation from their job. And they would call into the show and we would make sure their stories lined up and that all the parties involved wanted to come. And we would take them out to a diner and give them some smokes and wind them up and let them loose on stage. It was wild.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? We need Jerry to still be around and doing podcasts.
Yeah. So that was actually a career highlight, getting to catch up with him 20 years later. And to be honest, I kept in touch with his publicist for 20 plus years. She was lovely. I knew her in real life. And she's also been a publicist to other celebrities as well. I think she was like one of the original founders of Big Lots. So even before working for Jerry, she was a success and she just loved Jerry and his personality and him as a human. He did a lot behind the scenes, philanthropy wise and just community wise. He was a really good person. Yeah. And so I got a yes, I got a no, and then questions like how many listens can you get and all these things. And it needed to be at the right time and the right opportunity. And so I had another reality star reach out to me. Her name was Kale Lowry. I don't even know how she found me, but she was a mom of 4 like me. And she was on the show Teen Mom and 16 and Pregnant. And actually I worked on a documentary in my hometown in Kentucky that was about teen pregnancy. The entire high school was pregnant teens. There's a special high school for that in my hometown of Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky. And I don't know if she knew that I worked on that show or that we had similar audiences or backgrounds, but she reached out to me and said, hey, I'm launching a second podcast and I'm looking to do some swaps with podcasters. Would you like to do a swap for 50,000 impressions for 50,000 impressions? And I was like, as long as you don't care how long that takes me, I'm in. And so I then reached back out to Jerry's publicist and was like, hey, I have this reality star that's willing to promote me at the same time. I know I've gotten a yes and a no and a yes and a no. This would be a great opportunity where I can get you a lot of listens in a short amount of time. And so then I went back to her and was like, hey, I'm interviewing Jerry Springer. Can you promote that episode?
Wow.
And so that's how I solidified both opportunities. It was pretty cool.
So you've got the guest. What sort of research do you do then leading up to the episode's recording?
Great question. My preparation for Jerry was I listened to him on a lot of other podcasts first. Yeah. I wanted to see who he had recently talked to and what he's usually asked. And then also he had spoken at some colleges. And so I got access to what that looked like. And then I was like, how do I differentiate myself? And then someone, I'm pretty sure it was Sean Dillon from the Beyond the Mic podcast. I'm going to give him a shout out. He's been kind of like a mentor
shout out to Sean.
Yeah. Yes, he's so great. He also has worked in radio. And when I got a job in radio, I was like, Sean, help. How do I do this? It's a little different. Especially 20 years later. And he said, Reena, this guy, you worked with him. So if you can pull from that experience, nobody else has had that. So bring up things that you actually experienced, that he experienced, and that only he'll know about. And that will make your episode different. And I was like, wow, that's such a great, easy piece of advice.
Yeah, that's really clever.
It was.
Because you can pull anecdotes that nobody else will know because you were there.
Yes. Yes. And I was in a private Facebook group with 200 people that had worked on the show for the last 27 years.
Yeah.
Because they were thinking about doing like a reunion prior to him passing away and the show ending. And so I reconnected with a bunch of those folks who I had worked with and said, hey, is there anything you would ask Jerry? And so I did use some of that as well. A lot of people what's funny is they just wanted to know, hey, Jerry, do you remember me? Like, you've known so many amazing people in your life. Do you remember me? I only worked there for 3 years. I
need to go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah, it's episode 210. And he did remember me.
Yep.
And that was so validating. But just even to getting to ask him the questions like, hey, did you really understand what it was like to get those guests to come to your show? Like, you just showed up to host it. Do you know what that week looked like leading up to that? And he really understood a lot more than we realized.
Yeah, he seems like the sort of person that wouldn't have hairs and graces. He'd seem like the sort of person that would just be there and being involved in every little thing, or at least know how everything worked.
He was masterful. I honestly feel like he didn't give himself enough credit. Like, he said it has a lot to do with luck. I think luck is a piece, but he was a pro. There was no one like him. Originally, he got the opportunity because he was at the same station as Donahue, and he was like a replacement for Donahue. But he was good. He was really good. He was great on the fly and funny and said old timer things that resonated with people.
Yeah. It's like an early version of Better Call Daddy.
Yes. And you know what? He totally validated that idea too. He told me that nobody can replicate my relationship with my dad.
That's true. That's true.
And I loved him saying that. And I was like, Jerry, this show is partially because you inspired me. Instead of your final thought, my dad's giving the final thought. And it was so cool to be able to tell him that.
Wow. I'm looking forward to hearing your dad's takeaways from that episode.
It was really special. And after I did it, a couple of thoughts came to mind. I was like, how am I ever going to top this?
Yeah.
But then it's on some level, it also freed me because I was like, man, anything I do now is a bonus to this. Like, I got to experience that. And now I can literally just follow my curiosity. That was such a banger. It was such a big moment that I was like, damn, I can get anybody now.
Yep. I was about to suggest something, but I'm not sure how it would go, because there's a big thing at the moment, isn't there, with what's the name of the production company that used to make children's television shows or whatever, that had they had
Nickelodeon.
Is it Nickelodeon where there's a big thing going on at the moment where suddenly is her name Amanda Byrne or something, where she was, is it her or is it another actress, where things were done and all these things have come out recently from Nickelodeon?
I just heard something about that. I need to look more into it, but look, the television industry that I worked in was pre-Me Too.
Yeah.
And I saw plenty of that. I'll just say that.
Yeah, it's the entertainment business.
It's every business. It is honestly, unfortunately, every industry. It really is. I mean, I've worked in the finance industry. It's not much cleaner. My husband worked in oil and gas. Back in the day, I'm sure they were doing some scandalous things too. I've heard. Every industry, the trucking industry, I mean, you name it.
Yeah, but entertainment attracts it because of it. It's just that sort of like, I mean, especially with the younger people, because it's almost like they look up as this sort of almost unfathomable thing that, you know, oh, this is so good. I want to. It's like the attraction of the big star.
Oh yeah, life. Everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame. Everybody wants the spotlight, and I've worked on many reality TV shows where once that spotlight goes off of people, they have a really hard time with coping. Being at the center of attention and then it going away is a whole thing too. And some people chase that their whole life, and it ruins marriages and it ruins people. So I even question whether I would want my own daughter to even want to pursue those interests.
Hey, this is Danny from 1 Minute Podcast Tips, the show that helps you be a better podcaster in just a minute a week. And you're listening to Pods Like Us.
This is Mac Jackson from the Forever Adventure Network, the home of the MacGyver podcast, the Never Gets Old podcast, and the MacGyver SG-1 audio series. And you're listening to Pods Like Us.
So I remember, we're going into myself now from my own past. So I remember that when I was younger and I was doing the music thing, and I was a musician in gigging bands that were going around. And I bumped into somebody's wife recently, the lead singer of a band, who, he's gone away for something that he did, and because he did have affairs with younger ladies, shall we say, that were not of age. And and she was saying to me about this. She was saying, because I've been in, I think I was in a band who supported them twice at two different places. And I was saying to her that the thing is, I said, even as a support band or being there at the gigs, I said, I never saw any of that, because I said, number one, I was always playing at venues that were over a certain age anyway. So I said, it's very doubtful that anything would happen there anyway. But I said, if things are done, I said, sometimes you don't see these things because they happen behind closed doors in some situations.
True. Although I definitely got into bars before I was of age.
Yeah. I know, but I just didn't see any of that.
My mom didn't like that very much when she found my fake IDs and a pair of my jeans.
Of course, by the time that their sets ended, I've left anyway, because I've already done my job. So I wouldn't see any of the after show thing or be involved with any of that anyway.
Oh, some of these rock stars, the lives that they've led, the lives that they've led. Wow. Yeah, not most people could do that. And that's a bit how I felt about the end of my Springer chapter. Was like, okay, this is a great first job out of college. Yeah. I literally worked probably 70 to 90 hour weeks. It was insane. There was no cap on hours. You were living and breathing the show. It was a complete environment. And I knew that wouldn't be sustainable long term. And so after working on the show for 2 full seasons and the start of a 3rd season, I decided to move to LA and look for more redeeming content to work on.
Well, people don't realize that the amount of hours that people put in to these shows is
it's
ridiculous.
Exhaustive.
Because you think of even things like fictional television shows like the Star Treks and all these programs, and people don't realize that these people, especially those sort of shows which are makeup heavy, those actors and these people, these people come in at ridiculous times in the morning, and then they'll be there and they'll take 2-3 hours to do the work, to do their bit that they need to do. Then they'll go and do the acting and come back after they've done 8 hours, say, of acting, and spend another 2 hours of having everything taken back off. And a lot of these jobs are like that, where a lot of these television jobs, you'll find them working 15, 16-hour days for say 6 days a week, or sometimes 7, just to get these things done.
That was the regular on many shows that I worked on. Another show I worked on was like a bunch of different reality show stars. They had been on other shows, so like Survivor and Real World and Apprentice. They took like all of these reality stars from other shows. They gave them the opportunity to try to act and be in a Hollywood feature, and they filmed them all living in a house together, and then they filmed the making of this horrendous B movie. I was on the reality TV show side, so I was like a field interviewer, and I was working crazy hours. There were cameras in this rigged house 24 hours a day. The only room in the house that did not have a camera was the bathroom, and there was cameras outside the bathroom if any shenanigans were happening in the bathroom that we could pick up on the audio. So there were 3 shifts of workers, round the clock coverage. In order to make those stories come to life, you have to phone people around the clock. There was much less scripting then. It was kind of like, let them all live together. Some craziness is going to happen because they're all hot. They're all drama queens. They all want the camera. If you put them in a house together and then film them trying to be actors in a film, oh my God, it was crazy. It was called Kill Reality, and it definitely was that.
There's the thing. I mean, a lot of people think a lot of so a lot of people looked at old shows, the reality shows, as this sort of thing. But some people don't realize, and it is mentioned a lot in credits, but you always see it tiny on the screen, that there is scripting involved, and some of it is done for dramatic purposes.
Oh, yeah. Even I interviewed one of the nannies from Nanny 911.
Yeah.
And she was saying that she was a little disenchanted with Hollywood after seeing how it all comes together.
Yeah. The fakery can irritate if you know what's going on, I suppose.
Yeah. And I think that the nannies really actually wanted to make a difference in the lives of some of these parents that had out of control children. Yeah. And sometimes the scripting of that is not what's going to fix the families.
Yeah. And sometimes the editing can change the way that people are perceived as well. Yeah.
Oh, completely. And that's why even when Jerry passed away and I was reached out to by some different production houses about documentaries, I'm thinking to myself, I'm a mom of 4. I have a podcast. I have a platform. I can pick how things are edited and who I have on and how I'm perceived.
Yep.
And would I want to be on Netflix now and give all of that creativity and power to someone else when I don't have any say-so in the edit? I don't even know if I would say yes to that now, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that goes along similar line to something that your dad said as one of the takeouts from that recent episode, was he was saying about the world of podcasting giving you the ability to just put out there a reality that you can't put out in a more corporate world. Podcasting, if you're an independent podcaster,
yes,
and you are open to it, you can just put out everything as it is with as little editing as possible because it's real.
Yeah. And the moment you say yes to a network or syndication or joining a podcast network, they want you to do things for them and say things for them and edit things for them. And some of that goes away. You even have to be careful with sponsors that you attach to your name or your brand.
I'm glad you've said that because I'm talking to sponsors at the moment.
Just think about that. if you have a sponsor and their brand might not go with every story that you cover, then you might need to think about that beforehand.
Luckily, it's a podcasting network.
Okay. So that's pretty safe. But like some products,
I'm talking to Zencastr.
That's great. Yeah, they have a great product. And that's another thing. If you love a product and you use a product, like that's the best partnership to form. Like I personally love Headliner. I find it to be very easy to use, and it's a really easy way to repurpose. And I love the founder. He's super down to earth. And I think that he really wants to get podcasts in front of other content creators and other podcasters. And he's looking to try to help podcasters with long-term growth. I wouldn't even say this if I didn't even believe it was true. And if you have founders with millions of users that are willing to get on a phone call with you, that's the kind of person I would want a partnership with.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm on a train. My name's Owen Ling, and between writing books, I want to say you're listening to Pods Like Us, live from a train.
Hey, this is Chris from Podtastic Audio, the show that I have created to help you create your amazing podcast. And you are listening to Pods Like Us.
I'm not going to go any further with that because I'm arranging something to do with some founders from places. I don't like to jinx myself and say, oh, I'm talking to this person, because then if it falls through, you look like an idiot.
I've got a story like that. I recently reached out to someone with an extremely large audience.
Okay.
And this happens though, a yes and a no, then a yes, then a no, then a yes, then a no. That was Jerry for a year and a half. It took me a year and a half to completely secure that and do it. Look, it's got to be the right time, the right opportunity, the right reasons, the right research. You've got to be ready. I feel that way. But yeah, it just happened again where I got a yes, and then I got reached back out to by that person's team. And then I decided, because I had already gotten a yes from the person versus the team, to get a little disappointed by it and rework my message a little of what appealed to that person in the first place. And then I CC'd him, and then he wrote back this morning. So he followed up and was like, I didn't say no. I just said, give me a couple months and let's revisit in the future. And he was like, I'll re-talk to my team. I was like, fair enough. Yeah.
Okay. So I've been talking with Ariel Nissenblatt, Tom Webster from Sounds Profitable, and I've been talking with James Cridland and some other people as well. Danny from 1 Minute Podcasting Tips. And
He's
these
great.
people, and I know he's lovely. I mean, so all these people, and Chris from Podtastic Audio. And the idea is that, but you can never get hold of them all at the same time. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get all of them together for a group chat on my show, and then get podcasters to send questions in for them to answer. Essentially, that's the whole idea, is just to have a group chat with all of us and just have questions from people like yourself and other podcasters. And just, I will keep asking them to get advice from them for podcasters, because they are the people with that advice.
I love that. That's really smart. Yes. And I have a private Facebook group. It's free. It's called Business Laughs in LinkedIn. You should join it. And I bounce prompts off my audience all the time. And every Friday, I let people promote anything, promote someone else, promote a show, promote a book, promote a course you're doing, promote good in the world. And after my podcast, I like there to be a place where I can keep in touch with people. So I'm just like, hey, hang out here. Here's where I ask questions to my audience. And even with Reese, that episode that you talked about, I said, hey, any questions around Scientology? Any questions around cults? Any questions? I interviewed another guy who his entire show, David Hirsch, is interviewing fathers who have special needs children with disabilities. So I said, hey, is there anybody in my audience that has questions around raising special needs children? So any topics that I'm thinking of covering, I bounce off of my audience there, because a lot of times people have great questions, and it's another way to shout them out and send the episode to them later. Hey, I had your question answered.
Dare I say, I'm looking forward to a new episode that's coming out soon. My next episode, that's where I've spoken with a podcaster who has autism. And I love that episode. It was a really nice talk and just fascinating. Yeah.
Is it Chris?
Is his name Chris? I can't remember. Autism Rocks and Rolls, I think it's called, the show.
Okay. Yeah, that's a different show. And I think it's even Autism Awareness Month.
Okay.
Right now. So I don't know if you're releasing it this month, but
yes. Yeah.
Ooh.
That's releasing on, I mean, when this comes out, it'll have already come out. That's releasing on the 14th of April.
Yeah. April is Autism Awareness Month.
Wow. Brilliant.
You can use that hashtag.
Great. So research. So how do you record and edit the show? Sometimes you've said you record it in person. So I'm guessing that's done with equipment that you've got. So how does it work that way? And how does it work when you do it remotely?
Great question. So with my dad, Zoom is easy for him. Just like we're recording right now, I use Zoom for my dad. With some of the clients that I've worked with, I use Riverside.fm.
Yeah.
They have higher sound quality.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're in a studio. But for my dad, I feel like we both have decent mics and quiet places to record, and I edit it. So I feel like Zoom works just fine for us. When I'm doing it in person, I actually just spec'd out a new studio that I'm going to be working with here in Houston, and he uses Ecamm Live.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the recording software that he uses. I've also used StreamYard and Zencaster and CleanFeed. There's a lot of different ways to record. I think you have to use what's easiest for you and what's most affordable. I know Riverside is a little bit more expensive for less amount of time.
Yeah.
There's also Squadcast is another one.
It is.
And then the other one, I think both places that I've done like 3-camera shoots, they've both used Ecamm Live because you can personalize it. You can put in background images. You can frame it with your brand colors. And so, yeah. Let me think what else. I think they just recorded to a device or like a drive at one of the events I was working at, and they just gave me the file and it was on different audio tracks. So I rent people's studios on occasion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
One is audio only and they use a Rodecaster, and that's fine. Not everybody wants to be on video. I've actually done anonymous episodes. I've had people like really get vulnerable and they don't want their name mentioned, or they have a pen name that they go by or a personality that they go by. Actually, I'm getting ready to release an episode today with Mama D from Petals of Support.
Cool.
And we recorded video so we could build rapport with each other, but it is audio only. And I'm just going to use her graphic in promoting her. I've done that with multiple people. And yeah, so the studio that I shot at live, I went in, I tested the mics, I tested the cameras, I interviewed the guy who owned the studio, and then another podcaster came and interviewed me. So we checked all 3 mics, all 3 cameras. And then in a week from now, I went to a networking event like a couple weeks ago and shared with a business owner my Better Call Daddy idea. And he was like, oh, my brother has a really good daddy story. He runs a nonprofit. His son has a rare form of muscular dystrophy. So I'm going to get his brother's entire story of how he started the nonprofit and a bit about him and a bit about his kid and just all that he's discovered. And so I'm really excited about that to do locally. I feel like some of these personal stories, in order to really connect with people, when you're with them live, it's just a whole different level of intimacy.
Yeah. I forgot to mention that entirely. The fact that at the beginning of your show, you almost always, probably always, ask a question from your dad at the beginning. So I'm guessing that you give your dad a basic idea of the person that you're talking to so that he can ask this one specific question. Then you ask that, you get an answer, and then you go back to your dad to listen to the episode himself, and then come out with a takeout, which almost always starts with his reaction to them answering his question.
Yeah, thank you for that. I do let the guests know that they can ask my dad anything, or he can just reflect on their episode. And sometimes people come up with creative questions, and sometimes they just want my dad to weigh in on what they've shared, which is cool too. Sometimes my dad will listen to the episode and he'll hear the question. I'll have forgotten that they asked a question because I batch record. Yeah. And he knows now to always include the answers to the questions, because we've had to actually go back. And I'm like, Dad, you forgot to answer their question. Because when I QA it before I release it, I always make sure that the questions have been answered.
Yeah, that's good. I had to get that out. I just suddenly realized that I'd missed that point, and it's important.
Thank you.
It's important.
Thank you. Yeah.
So logo and music for the show.
Yes, the logo was a friend of mine who was laid off during the pandemic, and she's an artist, and I loved her work. She was, I think, like a designer at Red Bull, and she was a mompreneur. And actually, one of the podcasters who I was working for, she reached out to him and was like, hey, I've always wanted to design podcast art. And the podcaster I was working for was kind of like set on her design and her graphics already. And then I was like, I would love you to turn me into a cartoon. I love your work. And so she started with me, and I told her I always call my dad. So she had the idea of my dad kind of being like a genie in the bottle coming out of the phone.
Yes. That's what Louise said when she saw the picture. She said it's like a genie coming out of the phone.
And I was like, I love that. That's funny. And I went with it. Actually, my best friend from college, her name is Jeannie. So there's like a lot of meaning there. I liked it. And then I had her illustrate all my kids. I was like, hey, I have 4 other kids, turn them into cartoons. They were jealous of me and my dad turning into cartoons. And I had her animate my husband. So I actually have cartoons of all of us. And some of the graphics that I use, like on my YouTube channel or my Instagram, have the whole family around my guest.
I love the fact that you've got one of your kids as well, actually doing the connections, the bits,
the transitions. Yeah. Yes, and it's funny because Google Play just ended in April.
Yep.
Where they're no longer a place that you can listen to podcasts. And so I love Good Pods. I literally use Good Pods all the time to listen to your show, to listen to everyone's show. It's such a good way to search for podcasts, see what your friends are listening to, and listen on the go. And so I had my 4-year-old recently take out Google Play and say, on Good Pods. And so now in my outro, it's my 4-year-old saying, on Good Pods. And I like to, as my kids age, get them to do little updated sound bites. I had my daughter and my son say, let's switch it over to Grandpa. They've both done their versions of that. And then my 4-year-old recently said, I love Grandpa and I love Mommy. Just like little things like that you can use are fun and personalized.
It's lovely. That's lovely. Is the show music? I can't remember.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes, I worked with a professional musician in the 4th season to create some music where I helped write the lyrics, and then I had a professional musician sing it. I am tempted to go into a studio because I know about auto-tuning and being able to manipulate your voice to give it a go myself. But right now I have a friend of mine, musician, that recorded it.
It's probably easier to leave it with the professional without having to do the auto-tune. Maybe. I don't know.
We have a visitor.
You could come out sounding like Cher.
Okay. Sorry.
Editing for Scoob. Shout out to DJ Scoob.
Hey, DJ Scoob. He's done an intro for my show too.
Yeah. He does my editing.
Hello, Scoob believers. This is DJ Scoob. From The Undiscovered Entrepreneur, a show that highlights brand new entrepreneurs that are just getting started in their entrepreneur adventure, and you're listening to Pods Like Us with my good friend Marv. Reiki.
Hey, this is Ross.
Simon.
And Thomas.
From Who Takes the Socks Off podcast, the show that answers the questions you didn't even know you needed the answers to.
You're listening to Marv, the one-man podcasting machine.
On Pods Like Us.
So, logo music, standout moments. Are there any that really stand out to you, episodes that you think people should go to?
Yeah, my episode with Reese, the Leaving Scientology episode. Also, there was a guy who was a sperm donor to, I think, 23 kids at the time, and that number has gone up. That was one that my dad and the guest, I didn't feel like 100% saw eye to eye on. And so that's pretty interesting. And then there's another lady, her name is Connie Polk. I interviewed her in person, and then she interviewed me in person. And I felt like that episode really changed my dad's take on abortion, which is interesting.
Okay.
You know, sometimes knowing people and their circumstances can really make you change how you feel about things that you might not have thought were okay. And I really loved that.
Yeah. It can do that where you have an opinion, and then if you hear it from from another person's point of view, and in some cases there's a need for it, and in some cases, I think it changes according. If you see the story behind, I think it can sometimes change a perspective. But then again, that's life. All things in life, you'll come across people. And life is a journey where you learn new things as you go on in life, and your opinion sort of changes slightly according to what you learn through life's journey.
Through life's ups and downs, that's for sure.
That's right. So, standout moments. Any top tips that you take from your Actually, instead of top tips, are there any sort of like things that jump out that your dad has said where you've suddenly thought that they are tips that you think people would be good to learn from?
Tips from my dad that would be good to learn from?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think that we all need encouragers. And I'm seeing that so clearly in all of the episodes. And also another thread through the show has been that everyone is having a mental health journey now.
Yeah.
And if we can be more compassionate and understanding and tolerant, that's something that I really am working on. Because a lot of times if people are even treating you badly, they treat other people like that too. And try not to take things so personal. And also not be such a perfectionist. I feel like in the beginning of my podcasting journey, I was really so tightly wound about all the elements of the show. Leave room for magic, leave room for imperfection, and be a little bit more human.
Yeah, that goes in line with something that I said in response to Danny Brown from 1 Minute Podcast Tips. He put a question up about something, and I countered it with something else because I put my answer and then I put something else. And I put a tip for podcasters one thing is that there's a fine line between over editing and editing just the right amount. I said, because, if you've got too big a pause, that can pull people out. But at the same time, I said, it's good to have a little bit of pause because it's natural that people in a natural conversation, because these are real conversations between people, and conversations happen like that where you'll have someone will suddenly change tack and go somewhere else. And that's how it happens. And also you get pauses in conversations because people breathe, they have thinking time. And I said, if you have a little bit of a pause every now and again and allow that natural short pause, it also gives the listener time on a serious subject for them to have time to think, because then that allows them to become part of the experience of the podcast rather than just listening to. They can actually get involved in it. And that's what makes people enjoy podcasts, is because they become a part of it.
I 100% agree with you. And in the beginning, I was cutting out all those pauses, all those filler words.
Yeah.
It was way too tight.
Yeah.
And
I was doing the same thing.
It sounds choppy.
Yeah.
It sounds choppy. And even if you use an editing tool like Descript, like you need to re-listen to it, because a lot of times there's words that get clipped. You don't want it to be that tight.
No, you don't want it to sound unnatural and sort of go do beat without it almost sounds robotic sometimes if you go over the top with the editing.
100%. I have definitely loosened up there.
Same. Like I said, I did the same when I first started. I'd spend days editing. And then after so long, I'm thinking, why have I done it like that? It does not sound like a human being.
Yeah. And sometimes I go back to and listen to those and will cringe a little bit. But I think that people appreciate the journey and it's good to leave that stuff up.
I mean, I was surprised because you had the experience from before of doing the radio at college and these things. I would have thought that you would have been 100% in there from the off with the podcast.
Right. But I worked in radio 20 years ago and news is a lot different, and hitting a 30-second spot and a 60-second spot is a lot different than a conversation or a story or relating to other people and recording it. So you got to get your groove and you got to figure out how you want to piece things together.
And I'm guessing before you do the actual record, you will talk to the person first to almost warm up, essentially, as well.
Actually, it depends. Sometimes if you're interviewing a celebrity, you're not going to get that pre-interview. Or sometimes people that have been on a lot of shows, there's enough online where you can get an idea of who that person is, where you don't really need the pre-chat. Most of the time, if I do pre-chats with people, it's that there's nothing I can study about them online, or it's a new subject I know nothing about. With Reese, I never talked to her. That was our first conversation. But, there was a lot of content of hers online. And the person who sent me Reese, I was like, hey, which videos of her do you think I should watch beforehand?
Yeah.
So that was completely on the fly.
Right. I mean, you won't mind me saying it, but I had that with Sean O'Connell from Cinema Blend. When I had him originally, he was saying that you've got me at this time, and then suddenly I didn't have him at that time. You can start at this time instead. And there was a whole thing with that where it was set for this time. It had to be later because he was in a meeting. And then he contacted me again and says, oh, I'm ready now, but you've got me for this long. Where originally I'd got like an hour and a half planned initially. I suddenly had under 40 minutes. And it was like, oh, okay. And I mean, this was in my original set of recordings as well. So it's like baptism by fire recording, never done it before. And suddenly having to do that. But the thing is, because he's a professional, it didn't feel difficult at all, because it's almost like he was reassuring me in some ways, him being the professional and me being the amateur and the newbie, not having done it beforehand. So shout out to those moments, because they're the moments that you learn your craft, essentially.
There was a girl that I interviewed. Her name is Laura Wendell. Now it's Laura Tremaine, but I worked with her at Nanny 911 for 3 seasons. And we also worked together at VH1. Yeah. And she's got a 2-book deal, and she married an executive producer of Jackass, and she's living in the Hollywood Hills, and she's successful financially. And from afar, a lot of people look up to this girl. And she had a new book that was coming out, and I reached out to her and I was like, I would love to have you on. And I read your book and I loved your book. And I got nervous. I got nervous with her.
Right.
And I told her, and she was like, Reena, we're just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And her saying that really brought me back to normalcy.
Yeah.
Just her saying that. She was like, I've got a scarf on. We worked together. And she put me at ease, where I was then just able to talk to her in a normal way, where it wasn't like, and now Laura Wendell, right?
Yeah.
It's just to be like that. Yeah.
Because Sean said to me, he said, you've sent me all these points that you want to hit. He says, I know what you want to do. Just have a conversation and I'll make sure that these points come out. Just chat, he said. And that was his word base. He actually said that let's just chat and we'll see what happens. And that was like you said, it's almost like you don't need to be nervous, but yeah, You can be.
Yeah. For a lot of my life, I've put celebrities even up on pedestals.
Yeah.
And in order to relax and not completely freak out in interviewing somebody who I really wanted to interview, I have to remember these are just people. These are just conversations. Let there be curiosity. Let there be some normalcy. And you got to have like little tricks in your mind to take you back there.
I mean, sometimes I use a bit of time before starting, and depending on how long that is, that's sometimes to calm me down before recording. Because I had that when I was talking to Nicholas Tarkovsky, the writer and producer and director and actor. And I was talking with him late last year, and it came out early this year in January. And I said to him in this bit leading up to it, I was saying, I've been really nervous about this. And so that was basically to make me feel more comfortable, if I'm being honest, to have that bit of a chat before we started the official, because I needed to calm down.
Yeah. And I think it's perfectly fine to say that. I think that humanizes you, and then it almost puts you and the other person at ease.
Yeah, I think so. So what advice would you give to people starting their own podcast?
Don't be a perfectionist, and start with people who already love you, and they're going to give you some grace around recording errors or nerves or questions or unprofessionalism. You want to interview people who love you and are going to give you some slack.
Well, if your name's Raymond, then everybody loves Raymond. Oh, how did I get that one out there? Oh, dear. What podcast do you like to listen to?
Yeah, I shouted out Sean Dillon Beyond the Mic.
Yep.
He is great. He does some shorter, some longer. He's got the Rockin' 8 where he comes up with fun questions.
Yep.
He is an expert researcher on people. And you will hear again and again his guests say, how did you find that out about me?
Yeah.
And I love that. Another one, I just read his book. His name is Matt Drinkon. He's a fantastic interviewer. He's the host of the Eternal Optimist podcast.
Yeah.
And he's had many moments in his life where it wasn't easy to be an eternal optimist, and he interviews a lot of overcomers. And I think one great way to grow and to get out of funks and to up level is to listen to people who have done it.
Yeah.
And so I love the concept behind his book and his show.
Yeah, there's like yourself, there's a naturalness there. There's no pretense there that you'll find with some people. If you're willing to open yourself up in these podcasts, I think that makes it more interesting, because I've always thought that for the most part, people listen to podcasts are attracted to the personalities of the show, the people who make the shows. Because if you're looking for a film podcast, for instance, there are so many podcasts out there that do the same shtick, that you need that different personality to be able to pull these people in.
Yeah, definitely. I listen to so many independent shows because also, depending on who I'm going to interview, I will literally go on Good Pods and type in the name of the person I'm going to interview, and I see who else has interviewed them. And that's how I discover new shows. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
And
sometimes I do that. Yeah. Yeah.
I do that a lot. And it's another way to reach out to new podcasters. Hey, you interviewed Matt Drinkon. I'm having Matt Drinkon on. I just listened to your episode with him. Maybe you'll want to check out and learn a little bit more about him after I have my way with him.
Yeah. I mean, my show is all about talking to podcasters and creatives. So my time is listening to their podcast or watching things that they've made on video, because YouTube, I've got a YouTuber next coming up who also writes poetry online and fan fiction. So I will basically take in what it is that they do, and then that's how I do my research, essentially. So yeah, I've got thousands of podcasts in my feed.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love creating with other creators, and it's led to even creating custom music for my show and Bruce Chamoff, who's the CEO of the World Podcast Network. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yep.
He's got like 1,100 podcasts on his network now. I found out that he was a musician like yourself. And I was like, hey, if you're ever looking for somebody to sing a hook or background music for you, I'd love to collaborate. And now we've collaborated on one song, just the two of us. And then he included a third musician on a second track that we've now done together. So a lot of times creatives have more than one creative skill. And it could lead to music collaborations. It could lead to poetry. It could lead to being a part of an event together. It could lead to a panel. It could lead to you speaking to a group of people. I think
mine is not art.
Yes. I like your doodles of me and my dad. Yes. I just think if you're a creative, share other creative interests, because you never know how that could lead to other collaborations.
Okay. So thanks for speaking with me today. Where can people find you and get hold of you?
BetterCallDaddy.com is my website, and you can find me on most social media if you search up Reena Friedman, like Friedman Watts.
Wow, that's very quick. So they'll be able to contact you through the website, I'm guessing.
Yes, Reena at BetterCallDaddy.com. You can reach me.
Cool.
That way.
Anyway, you can find Pods Like Us on any streaming platform. We're also on YouTube and Roku. Where else are we? And there's a Patreon page as well. Just look for Pods Like Us on any of those places and any of the socials, and contact us through podslikeus@gmail.com. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.